name is David Strachan. I'm Creative Director at Pulselive. I manage the design team at Pulselive. We're responsible for UI, UX across all of our products, website, mobile, native mobile stuff. So that pretty much covers it.
You're a big Newcastle fan, sports fan, and you have over 13 years experience.
Thank you.
In design,
yes.
Digital design.
Yes, all correct.
Yes.
I studied marketing management at university, quite a random choice. I was always interested in art and design, but then went to do marketing, more business, felt more like a useful degree, but I haven't really used any of the marketing now. My third year of the university course was work placements, where I'd work for a company for a year and get experience working in industry. That third year work placement was with a company called Sotic, who built rugby websites. They were just two guys at the time, John and Leo, and I joined them as a student, so it was very interesting. Good learning experience where they taught me Photoshop, HTML, CSS. It was a very interesting experience. Building rugby websites, and then I went back to university. I continued to do a little bit of work for them, and then when I finished university, they offered me a full-time job in London to start my career.
Okay, so your career in London.
Yes.
Basically, so you started as a web designer, am I right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yes, yeah, very much focused on actually designing websites, the visual part of them, and then I worked with another guy, Howie, who's a good friend of mine, and he would build the websites. So there was a little team there just building out websites. It's good.
And also you started only to design pages in Photoshop.
Yeah.
We are talking about 2000.
We're probably talking about when I first started working at Sotic as a student. That would have been around 2002, 2003, and then when I joined full time, that would have been 2004. And yeah, it was in the very early days as a student, when I was learning things, I was sort of making suggestions. I would draw things out on paper, sketch out web designs, sketch out home pages. We didn't need to worry about responsive websites then, because there weren't any responsive websites. There weren't even mobile. You couldn't even look at things on your mobile. And then when I came back to the company full time, 2004. Then yes, it was Photoshop, using Photoshop to design everything.
Was it difficult to then communicate your designs to developers, and also was it difficult to make something which can be done using technology?
No, at that time it was pretty straightforward. I guess web design was quite limited back then in terms of what you could and couldn't do. It was all table based. Everything was sort of so you're designing in straight lines, and I suppose the type of websites that we did were quite specific. They were sports sites, and so you quickly build up an understanding of what works and what doesn't work. And the main challenge with sport websites, still to this day, is trying to deal with the volume of content and the different range of content that sport websites hold, and that's always been the challenge, really. It was fun back then, and in terms of communicating to the developers, not really. We were fortunate in that we sat together, so it was very much a collaborative process, and it was we straight away from the very start built up a very good understanding of how I was designing things and how he would develop things, and so we would work very closely together, and I would know if I was designing something, if that would be too difficult for him to develop, or if it would cause any problems. So it worked fine. Yeah.
And when did you start with leading teams? Because it happened at that job, I guess.
Yeah.
Same company.
Yes. Yeah. So I was at Sotic for 6 or 7 years. And over that period of time the company grew. So obviously when I joined there was me, the designer, Harry the developer, and then John and Leo, and then we kept on growing. We took on designers and developers to work underneath us. At Sotic, I would say the design team probably grew to about 4 or 5 maximum. Not huge. I think the company size in total was about 30 at that time, at the time I left. I think it grew slightly bigger once I left, and then and then in the job following, it was a very different job. It wasn't actually web design. It was working for a sponsorship agency, a sports sponsorship agency, advising them how they could use digital for their clients. So giving them ideas around social media, almost sort of being an in-house advisor around any digital projects. So working with third-party digital providers, making sure that they were doing what we wanted them to do, and we weren't being taken for a ride, that kind of thing. And I was very much on my own. I was kind of like a sole digital person within that agency, and so almost like an internal consultant type thing. And that's where I met Wyndham, and he then asked me if I'd be interested in joining Pulse. So that's where that came from, because we were working together, doing a lot of things for SAP, building out interesting things for tennis using Hawkeye data, Hawkeye visualization, putting Hawkeye into mobile apps that we were developing with SAP, and that's how I came across. And then he told me about Pulselive. So and here I am.
Then it was 2012. You joined the Pulselive.
Yes.
There were a few people.
Yes, a few people, a handful of people. I think there was probably about 10 to 15 people maximum, probably more like 10.
And all of them, they were focused on digital.
Yes, very much.
Solutions.
Very much. We had less mobile actually. Mobile came later, but we had predominantly a strong back end and front end team. And then I pretty much came in as the only designer. And back then, they didn't really do designs in Photoshop. It was all sort of straight into HTML, which had its advantages. And I joined not long after Anthony, who's one of our lead front-end developers now, and his role was sort of he formed part of my team, the creative team, and he would actually build out HTML designs. He would look at what I'd designed in Photoshop and then build them out, and when we would work together to do the fine-tuning. And then the company just kind of evolved from there, really. We've taken on more front-end, we've taken on more creative designers, UI, and then more recently UX, and then obviously alongside all of that we've grown out a mobile native team. So
how's your flow for designing things, if you can describe it very shortly?
My flow for designing things, just get on with it, just design it. We have a lot of experience. We're fortunate in that we've got some very talented designers, and they have a very good understanding of the type of websites that we do, and the unique requirements that come with these types of websites. So we're already aware of the majority of the challenges that we'll face before we get into the design. So as we're going through the process, we're pretty efficient. There are always going to be things which are more complicated, things that require a lot more thought around a user interaction or a user journey. So that's where the value of UX can come in, and somebody looking at it from a very much not a visual eye, but from looking at it from a usability standpoint.
So basically, the most recent, most popular project you've done is Premier League website.
Yeah.
Where did you get the ideas for how it should look, and
Well, the Premier League
get ideas in general?
Well, the Premier League website was interesting, and I suppose it's kind of an approach that we've taken to quite a lot of our websites. These websites are very heavy in content, lots of data, fixtures, results, tables, stats, video, news, photos. There's so much stuff to put into these things, and actually the approach that we tend to take is really thinking about the content. So it's very much content-led design. So we will wireframe up whole pages, thinking about how we can build out these pages. But I suppose the two considerations are, firstly, content-led design, because content is the most important thing, and then secondly, designing it in a way in which it gives flexibility to the client to manage the website, because sport by its nature has peaks and troughs in terms of when it's busy, when there's loads of content during a season or during a weekend. There's loads of content. Outside of that, there's less content, and certainly outside of season, there's less content, and they shift their focus depending on what they want to, what the sort of the levels of interest are at that time. So we need to provide a site, a solution for across mobile and web that gives them the flexibility to quickly adapt the design to be something different. So those are the two considerations that we put in, and then the final part is really just sort of applying the branding to the site. The branding is very much a secondary consideration with these types of things, but it needs to be done in a way that excites, that it sort of comes across. And if you look at Premier League, the rebrand that Premier League have gone through, very striking, very bright, vivid, and so it's trying to get that across without being too distracting to all the content. So,
how difficult it was, in your point of view, to like manage all designs across different platforms, like mobile, Android, iOS, website, responsive website, like in your point of view, because you are responsible to about the whole final product.
It's generally, I don't actually find it too difficult, to be honest. I mean, we obviously start with one platform, and then we'll bring in more designers to work across various aspects. These sites are huge. There's so many pages that need designed and thought through and developed, and so inevitably you're always going to have more than one or two designers on a project of that scale. So it's a matter of you start off initially defining sort of the key elements to it. You have the structure, then you have all the sort of the key UI elements, and then once you've built that almost like a toolkit, then you start, then you can start bringing other designers in to then start working on other platforms. So, bring in another designer to work across the native mobile app, and he already has the tools and the look and feel, and how we're approaching these things for another platform, and so that instantly gives him a head start, and it ensures consistency. And because we all sit together, we all catch up together and review all the designs that we've done and look to see where we can make consistencies. There's always going to be some differences between like iOS, Android, and then sort of mobile web. You're always going to get some differences, but as long as there's sort of a general consistency and it feels like part of the same family, then that's the key thing.
Okay, if we can move to work in UK in general, maybe in London. How difficult is to find a good designer in London?
Very difficult. Very difficult. There is so much competition for roles. There is a huge freelancer market at the moment in London. I think because by the nature of the type of work, designers like to have variety, and so if they're looking for variety, then they'll probably feel that freelancing is a way to go. So you have this sort of huge community of freelancers. The thought of being a full-time employee doesn't appeal to many of them, particularly the younger ones. But we're very lucky. We have, as I say, we've got a very good group of very talented designers, and we're fortunate in that sense. But yes, it is difficult. It's one of the most difficult things, and I think because it's so easy to review someone's application and say yes or no very quickly, because it's very visual. It's you can look at a portfolio and you understand the type of sites that we're doing, and there's so many designers out there who have just done very conceptual things that actually don't really. It's a little bit like Dribble. I find another problem with things like Dribble is it's very visual. There's no thought behind anything that gets designed, and actually, if you were to turn that into a product, it would just be a terrible product, because there's no thought for UX behind a lot of the things, and and for us, the types of websites that we do, UX, obviously needs to form a very key part of it. We've got to make sure that our websites, our mobile apps are easy to use, because so many people are going to be using the products.
So what are the key attributes for a good designer you look for?
Well, in terms of UX or UI or whatever.
Let's start with UX.
UX. I think it's having a solid understanding of what it is that they're designing for. So, whether that's the type of sport. I mean, we deal with some quite complicated sports like cricket. Having a good understanding as to what fans are actually wanting from a cricket site is fundamental to the whole thing. So you really need to understand things from a fan's perspective, and that helps separate out the complications of all of this wealth of cricket data and actually help you focus on actually what it is that the fan's looking for. So I'd say a good understanding of the sport or the type of product that you're working on. I'd then say to an extent, not hugely important, but a sort of a technical level of understanding around data, where it comes from, how these sites can be pieced together, and so that we're not creating solutions that are unrealistic from a development standpoint, and then also an appreciation of visual design and how visual design can play a role in evolving wireframes that are developed, because as I say, we work in sport websites, so sport websites are highly visual. They need to be quite impactful, but they're not detract from the content, and so having an idea as to how we can balance those is important.
In terms of education, do you think that it's better for UX designer to have technical background or artistic background?
Oh, well, I would say artistic, but that's because that's my experience, and that helps me. I probably focus more on UI and visual, and I know we've got a very firm understanding as to how we can approach websites from a UX perspective, and as long as that is well thought through, then I like to try and really make sure that the website is visually impressive as well. These things need to be very usable, but also quite visually impactful. Having said that, I think the different approaches are useful. I think people think of the way that you approach a wireframe or a site design or mobile design is probably from more of a technical standpoint. It probably makes you sort of look at it from less of a creative and maybe more of a mathematical, more of a sort of almost like a black and white. This is right. This is wrong. This is good theory. This is not good theory. Versus a visual perspective where you kind of look at a wireframe and you go, well, yeah, but if we put this here, then that gives us the ability to perhaps bring in some branding here, and I think it's important to have both, really. And so it's an interesting dynamic to have both of that at Pulse, and I think we're better for it.
Okay, I think we covered everything. Just one more question.
Yep.
What do you think in digital design? What is the next big thing?
I would probably say, if you look at the likes of what Amazon, Google, Apple, all of those guys are investing in, it's a lot of stuff around. I've been told artificial intelligence isn't the right term for it, but the whole voice, more connected devices, being able to interact with technology more in more of a sort of a natural way, sort of natural language technology. The investment those guys are putting into it, we're now seeing it's interesting to compare it to something like virtual reality, where a lot of people get excited about virtual reality, but actually what do people have in their homes? And these, Amazon Echo, Siri, these things are becoming fairly standard objects in homes now. They're affordable, they're easy to set up, and people are using them right now, versus virtual reality still a million miles away from being in everyone's home, if it ever will be in everyone's home. So what I'd say right now is this, and how that sort of connected technology can work. And we're already seeing things like cars driving themselves, a lot of automation and robot, and there's a lot of connection there with all that technology. So I would say that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good.